Have you ever felt like you don't quite fit in? Like no matter how hard you try, people just don't seem to understand you? That's not a coincidence. That's a sign. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to stand out. God has set you apart for something greater, something extraordinary. But here's the truth. Not everyone will see it. Not everyone will understand the journey you're on because they weren't given the same calling. Jesus himself said in John 15:19, "If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world." That means the very fact that you feel different, that you've faced rejection, isolation, or challenges, is proof that you are chosen. And let me tell you, when God chooses you, the enemy notices. That's why the attacks have been intense. That's why the road has been difficult. But what you're about to learn today will change the way you see your entire journey. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal will confirm things you've been feeling but couldn't explain. This message isn't for everyone. That's why the world won't understand. But if you're here right now, it's because God is speaking to you. He's calling you higher. And by the time this is over, you'll know exactly why you were set apart and how to walk boldly in your divine purpose. So before we begin, do this. Type, "I am chosen," in the comments if you know God has called you for something greater. Let's declare it together. And if you're ready for this revelation, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what God is speaking. Are you ready? Let's dive in. If you're reading this, know that it's not by chance. Nothing happens without purpose when it comes to those chosen by God. From the moment you were born, a divine calling was planted in your heart. A calling that you may not fully understand yet, but it's there, beating inside you. The Bible teaches us in Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." This means that even when life feels confusing or overwhelming, God has already mapped out a purpose that is uniquely yours. He didn't create you randomly. He designed you with precision, love, and intention. The truth is, when God calls you, not everyone will understand. Your path won't always make sense to those around you because they weren't given the same assignment. Jesus himself faced rejection. Even in his own hometown, people questioned his identity and authority. Mark 6:4. That's why you might feel out of place at times, as if you don't belong in the spaces you once felt comfortable in. But don't mistake rejection for failure. It's often God's way of redirecting you toward his greater plan. When others don't see your vision, it's because God gave it to you, not them. This calling comes with an unmistakable pull on your soul, a deep sense that you were made for something greater. Have you ever felt a longing in your spirit, a restlessness that tells you there's more to your life than what you're currently experiencing? That's not just a random feeling, it's the Holy Spirit stirring your heart. Moses felt it when he left the palace to lead his people, Exodus 2:11-12. David felt it when he was anointed king while still tending sheep, 1 Samuel 16:13. God has placed something inside of you that cannot be ignored, no matter how much you try to fit into the mold of this world. However, answering this call requires faith. When God spoke to Abraham and told him to leave everything behind and step into the unknown, Abraham obeyed, even though he had no idea where he was going. Hebrews 11:8. That's the level of trust God asks from his chosen ones. It's about walking in obedience, even when the path isn't clear. God doesn't reveal the entire journey at once. He gives you just enough light to take the next step. That's why faith is so crucial. Faith isn't about seeing, it's about believing in what God has spoken over your life, even when nothing around you makes sense. So, if you've ever felt misunderstood, out of place, or even isolated, take heart. You are not alone. God has been preparing you, shaping you, and setting you apart for something extraordinary. The world may not see it yet, but that doesn't change the reality of what God has ordained for you. Your journey is not meant to conform to the world's expectations, but to align with God's divine purpose. And the more you embrace this, the more you'll realize that what seemed like setbacks were actually setups for something far greater. You weren't made to follow others. You were made to lead. And because of that, your journey will often feel different, unfamiliar, even lonely at times. Being chosen by God means being set apart, and that means you won't always fit into the world's mold. Jesus said in Matthew 7:14, "But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." This is why your path doesn't look like everyone else's. You're not supposed to walk the well-worn trails that others have taken. Instead, God is calling you to pioneer a new path, one that has never been walked before. When you step into the unknown, you'll encounter resistance. No great move of God has ever happened without opposition. Think about Noah. God called him to build an ark when there had never even been rain. Genesis 6:13-22. People must have mocked him, ridiculed his faith, and questioned his sanity. Yet, Noah didn't need their approval. He only needed obedience to God. The same is true for you. When God gives you an assignment, the opinions of others are irrelevant. What matters is that you trust the one who called you. But let's be real. The pioneer's road can feel heavy. Sometimes it seems like God is silent when you need him most, or that he's taking too long to reveal the next step. Moses had to wait 40 years in the wilderness before stepping into his calling. David was anointed king but had to run for his life before he ever sat on the throne. Even Jesus spent 30 years in preparation for only 3 years of ministry. Why? Because preparation is essential for those who are called to break new ground. God is not delaying your promise. He is preparing you for it. When the journey feels lonely, remember this: you are never truly alone. God is walking every step with you. The enemy will try to whisper lies in your ear, making you doubt your path, but his voice is irrelevant when God has already spoken. The Bible says in Deuteronomy 31:8, "The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." That means even when you don't see him, even when you don't feel him, he is there, guiding, protecting, and strengthening you. So don't be afraid of standing out. You were never meant to blend in. If God has chosen you to lead, then embrace the journey with confidence. What he has placed inside you is bigger than the obstacles ahead. The path may not be easy, but it is divinely designed just for you. And as you continue walking in obedience, you'll start to see doors open that no man can shut. Opportunities arise that only God could orchestrate, and favor resting on you in ways you never imagined. You are not just walking a road. You are paving the way for others to follow. Not everyone will understand what God is doing in your life. In fact, most won't, and that's okay. Spiritual awakening is not something that can be forced. It happens in God's perfect timing. Jesus himself experienced this. He spoke in parables, revealing deep spiritual truths, but only those with eyes to see and ears to hear could truly grasp them. Matthew 13:10-11. This means that no matter how much you try to explain your faith, your vision, or the transformation happening inside you, some people simply won't get it, because they are not ready. Have you ever shared a revelation with someone only to be met with blank stares or skepticism? It's not that they don't care, it's that they haven't received the same understanding from God yet. Paul speaks about this in 1 Corinthians 2:14, saying, "The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness, and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit." It's frustrating, but it's also a reminder that your job is not to force enlightenment upon others. Your job is to walk in your truth. Think of Saul before he became Paul. He was convinced he was doing God's work by persecuting Christians, until Jesus himself intervened on the road to Damascus. Acts 9:3. His transformation didn't happen because someone argued with him or tried to force him to see the truth. It happened because God opened his eyes in his perfect time. The same applies to those around you. Some will resist, some will reject you, and some will even mock your faith. But it's not your responsibility to make them understand. It's your responsibility to live out your faith authentically. And here's the hard part. As you grow spiritually, some relationships will naturally fade. Not everyone is meant to walk with you in this next season of your journey. Just as Abraham had to leave his homeland and family behind, Genesis 12:1, there will be people who cannot go where God is taking you. It's painful, but it's necessary. God removes people not to punish you, but to protect your purpose. And in time, He will replace those relationships with people who are aligned with your calling. Those who understand the journey you're on, and who will encourage your faith rather than question it. So, let go of the pressure to be understood. Jesus never wasted time trying to convince people of who He was. He simply walked in His purpose, performed miracles, and let His actions speak for Him. The more you focus on your own spiritual growth, the more your life will become a testimony in itself. Instead of arguing or trying to prove your faith, live in a way that makes others curious about the peace, strength, and joy you carry. Some will take notice, some will seek answers, and when they are ready, God will use you as a light to guide them to Him. Isolation is not punishment, it is preparation. One of the hardest seasons in a chosen one's journey is the period of solitude. You might feel as if God has stripped away everything familiar, friends, opportunities, even your comfort zone. But here's what you need to understand. God isolates before He elevates. Look at Joseph. Before he stepped into his destiny as a ruler of Egypt, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and imprisoned. Genesis 37:41. What seemed like rejection was actually divine redirection. Many chosen ones go through a season where God pulls them away from the crowd. Not because He's punishing them, but because He's preparing them. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading the Israelites to freedom. Exodus 3:1-10. Jesus Himself spent 40 days in the desert before starting His ministry. Matthew 4:1-2. Why? Because God does His best work in isolation. When you're alone, without distractions, without the noise of the world, that's when you hear Him most clearly. He needs to teach you, refine you, and strengthen your faith for what's coming next. The enemy, however, will try to make you believe that this isolation means abandonment. He wants you to feel forgotten, overlooked, and unworthy. He whispers lies, making you question if you're on the right path, if you misheard God's instructions. But God's silence is not His absence. Sometimes the teacher is quiet during the test. And right now, you might be in the middle of a divine test. The question is, will you trust God even when you can't see what's next? Faith is your fuel in this season. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to trust the one who does. In 2 Corinthians 5:7, the Bible says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." That means even when nothing seems to be happening, even when doors seem closed, God is still working behind the scenes. And when the time is right, what He has been preparing you for will suddenly unfold. Your isolation is not the end of the story. It's the setup for something greater. So instead of fighting the isolation, embrace it. Use this time to strengthen your relationship with God, deepen your understanding of His Word, and prepare yourself for the next season. Because when God finally opens that door, you won't just walk through it. You'll be ready to run. What's ahead of you is far greater than what you've left behind. And soon, you'll look back and realize that every lonely night, every unanswered question, every painful moment was leading you to exactly where God wanted you to be. Your path is unlike anyone else's. Embrace it fully. One of the biggest traps in life is comparison. Looking at someone else's journey and feeling like you're behind, unqualified, or not good enough. But here's the truth. God didn't make you to be a copy of someone else. He made you unique, with a divine assignment that only you can fulfill. Psalm 139:14 reminds us, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. That means nothing about your life is a mistake. Not your personality, not your gifts, not even your struggles. Everything is part of God's design. The moment you stop comparing your timeline to others, you'll start seeing the beauty in your own journey. Think about David. He was anointed king as a teenager, but he didn't step into the throne until years later. During that time, he was still tending sheep, still being overlooked, still running for his life. But what if he had looked at Saul and thought, why does he get to be king while I'm hiding in caves? David's story teaches us that God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our expectations. What he has planned for you will happen at the right time, in the right season. Difficulties are not obstacles, they're opportunities for growth. Every hardship, every delay, every rejection is shaping you. Joseph's betrayal by his brothers, Daniel's time in the lion's den, Esther's moment of courage before the king. All of them had to go through struggles before stepping into their destiny. God doesn't waste pain. Whatever you've been through, He is using it for your good. Romans 8:28 reminds us, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Joy is your weapon. When you embrace your journey with joy, you confuse the enemy. He expects you to complain, to feel discouraged, to give up. But when you choose joy in the middle of difficulty, you declare that your faith is bigger than your circumstances. Paul wrote most of his letters from prison, yet he constantly spoke about rejoicing. Philippians 4:4 says, Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Why? Because joy isn't based on what's happening around you. It's based on who is with you. And God is with you every step of the way. So, stop looking at others. Stop wishing your journey was different. And start embracing where God has placed you right now. Your path is sacred. Your process is necessary. Your story is unfolding exactly as it should. Trust that God knows what He's doing. Walk in faith. Walk in joy. And most importantly, walk boldly in the purpose He created you for. Because the moment you fully embrace your journey, you will step into everything God has prepared for you. You are exactly where you need to be. Trust God's plan. Even when the road feels uncertain, even when challenges arise, hold on to faith and embrace your divine calling. What God has placed inside you is bigger than any obstacle ahead. Your journey is unique, your purpose is powerful, and your life has a meaning beyond what the world can see. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt misunderstood because of your faith? Have you gone through seasons of isolation, doubt, or feeling out of place? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might encourage someone who is walking a similar path. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. God is speaking, and you don't want to miss what He has for you next. And before you go, make sure to check out the next video on your screen. It's going to take you even deeper into the journey of faith and purpose. This is Joseph, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay blessed.